So, how do you think? One thing I caught on from what you were talking about with your dad was more, or less about his art and more about the business, right? So, it was more the business of songwriting and the business of music that you were really not a fan of, it sounds like. But at the same time, I imagine learning that side of things from your dad has been absolutely, probably life changing for you now that you are a full artist, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah. And, towards the end of my dad's career in Nashville, he had started lobbying in Washington, D.C. against Spotify
Hmm.
because of how Spotify started paying the artists. It's like we make 0.0001 penny per stream. And yeah, streaming has really affected the songwriting world. And so I think there was a bit of frustration that I even felt coming from him and his friends who had been doing it for so many years when, you could make a really good living just being a songwriter and getting cuts and getting hits, or even just like an album filler song, you could still make money off of that.
Hmm.
And so I learned definitely from a young age and then into getting into music myself that most contracts are going to screw you
Hmm.
unless you come in, having your own fan base and having something that you're coming with. Um, yeah, I definitely learned, it's like, for instance, I had American Idol reach out to me in 2020 whenever COVID was going on, and they said, "Hey, we want you to be on the show. We think that you could be a top 10 artist on here, blah, blah, blah." And so they waved me through the audition process and gave me like the golden ticket
Yeah.
to LA and all that stuff. And I told them, though, I said, "Well, before I do anything, I've got to see the contract. I'm
Hmm.
not going into this blindly." So they sent me the contract and I gave it to my dad's lawyer up in Nashville. And I went in and had a meeting with him. And as soon as I sat down, he was like, he took the piece of paper and was like, "You're insane if you sign this." And I was like, "What do you mean?" Like, I thought it would be great exposure and all this. And, he was like, "They're going to own you for five
Yep.
albums.
Yep.
You never know how long that could take."
Hmm.
So I learned, to really, you have to watch your own back, when it comes to all of that. And I think if I wouldn't have had the background of what my dad did and having somebody that had advocated for himself, he'd also been screwed. Like, he wrote a song called "Roll With It" for Easton Corbin, and he wrote it like years before it was ever cut, and that was in his Schedule A. Whenever he moved to Nashville and got his first publishing deal, they told him, "Pick 25 songs for your Schedule A and we'll pay you $300 per song." So my dad was like, "Awesome." So he had written "Roll With It," and he was 27 years old at the time, and um gave them that song for
Three hundred
$300.
bucks.
And
Yeah.
then, years later, Easton Corbin records it. It becomes a number one, and he had given that song away for $300.
Yep.
So it's like, I think that's probably been the best thing about, having somebody that already went through all of it that can share it with me. I've been very blessed to have
Yeah.
that for
As a
sure.
young songwriter, he was probably thinking, "Hell, man, that's $7,500. I could pay a lot of bills with that." It's
Absolutely.
kind of like the advance thing that they'll do, right? That publishers will do. They'll give you an advance, and then you have to essentially give away your songs until that advance is paid off. And man, they do. They try to take advantage of you every which way they can. And I'm glad you didn't. I'm
Absolutely.
glad you didn't sign that contract with American Idol. First of all, like thank goodness, because I can't imagine the music that's going to come from you now.
Well,
Haven't
thanks.
heard the first EP that is just ridiculous, but um, uh, we have I haven't mentioned his name yet. If you haven't caught on yet, this is the daughter of Hall of Fame songwriter David Lee, who was just recently inducted into the Texas Heritage Songwriters Hall of Fame, which to me as a Texas music fan is the songwriting Hall of Fame in Texas. It
Yes.
is the place. Like, go look at their inductees, you'll know what I'm talking about. And my friend Leslie Satcher, I think, was one of his co-inductees, and
I
yeah,
love
I love
her.
Leslie to death. She's so sweet. I
Precious
I
human.
have a record over here, numbered to 100, that she signed to me. There's only 100 of them made,
Aw.
so it was one of my prized possessions. Um, So, one of let's talk about this with your dad. I'm sure he mentored your songwriting, but what are some things that you do differently as a writer than him that kind of makes you stand on
Ooh,
your own feet?
good question.
Thank you.
I would say definitely the um he, with him being like writing for country radio, he definitely has more of like the commercial, um, you know, okay, I guess as a staff songwriter, you're not really telling your own
Yep.
stories. You're, telling a story that anybody can relate to, and I think that is super important as a songwriter. But I think with me being an artist slash songwriter, sometimes my songs have a little more of a personal touch on them than I think that his probably do, since he was, writing for the masses. And also, since I haven't really ever been writing for radio, I have kind of that, like, some of those jazz soul progressions in some of my music. Or maybe I'm not as worried about how many chords are in a
Yeah.
song,
Less structure,
because
right?
yeah,
Yeah.
less structure. But he definitely taught me, I guess, the art of like a hook, and of like a turn of phrase, and how to paint pictures. His biggest thing when I was growing up was like, don't say it,
Show it.
show it.
Yeah. Descriptive
Yeah,
language. Yeah. Yep.
absolutely. And so I've kind of found that, when I write with people, that's one of the biggest things that um, I'm constantly trying to do, is like, okay, instead of saying like we walked, to the lake, how can we show a picture of that?
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that there's definitely a blend of, you know, doing my own thing as an artist, but then also taking the pieces that resonated with me,
Yeah.
that, he taught me from a young age.
I
So,
love that.
yeah,
So my next two notes, you just touched on both of them. So this is perfect. So I was going to talk about the marketability versus relevance in songwriting and resonance and things like that. But you brought up the descriptive language in your songwriting, and I really wanted to touch on that. My note here is the ability to bring scenes to life in music. That's the note I wrote
mm,
for this segment. So talk a little bit more in depth about that as a songwriter and as, let's be honest, a young songwriter, being able to
yeah,
be picturesque in less than 3 minutes, but still bring a plot and a beginning and an end to a story. Like, that's really difficult for
sure.
3 minutes, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I when I listen, there's certain music that I listen to that it's more about the beat or about the melody.
Absolutely.
And I think that there's a time and place for that, for sure, because when you're out on the lake with your friends, or you're, at a party or something, nobody's like sitting around listening to, every
That's
line,
right.
and if it's this poetic thing. So there's that. But then there's also, I don't know, I think that for me, as a lover of words, I love poetry, I love reading. I'm actually in the middle of trying to write my own book. um there's a piece of that that is, it's a piece of art, and whenever you put your music out there, and I think I just want everything to have my stamp on it. And so I think for me, like, rather than just saying it, I want to be able to show it.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I don't know. I think that maybe it's just something that's like learned through song after song, because I'm sure my first songs didn't paint any kind of picture, you know.
Do you think
Um,
nowadays? I mean, it's been kind of this way for the last 30 years or so, but I feel like the music video is so important in selling a song nowadays, especially kind of in the DIY markets. And everybody can make their own videos. They can make their own songs with bathroom studios and just an iPhone with a video. Um, how do you think the role of the music video plays in having that descriptive language in your songs? Because obviously, being able to film a video and show, now you get to show that in video form, but it's already there in audio form. It makes things kind of easier, doesn't it?
I agree 100%. Yeah, I think yeah, like whenever we did the Dive Bar Superstar
Yes.
music video, that was super cool because, we were able to, like, I was, well, so I had this amazing director and film artist who was from Paris, France. And that was kind of his whole thing, was he was like, how can we turn these lyrics into something that people can see, but also make it a little bit maybe different, because that's kind of the cool thing too to me about music videos, is like, as a writer, I see it in my brain the way that I see it, but
Right.
it's cool to see somebody else take it and turn it into something that they see too. So when we did that music video, I thought it was just going to be like, oh, we're going to be at a dive bar and it's me people cheersing and whatever.
Hmm.
And he was like, I see you in this like mansion and this like beautiful bathtub with candles, and then like, and then the next scene you're walking out of this like, trailer, because that's the reality of
Yeah.
being like a dive bar
Yep.
superstar, is like, in your brain you're this big thing, but really you're like living, more like a dive bar superstar.
Hmm.
So yeah, I think the music videos are super fun. I have a new project coming out this winter, and I'm hoping to do a couple more music videos, because that was
Cool.
like a whole new piece of art that
Yeah.
I had never really got to experience.
Yeah.
So that was super cool to see how someone else can see your vision and turn it into theirs.
Yeah, and that's how lyrics are anyway, right? Like you can write it with one meaning, and then somebody could get something completely different out of it.